Forence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp. Florence was a famous nurse who was responsible for making nursing an honorable profession. She was born on May 12, 1820 in Florence, Italy, and was named for her birth city. Florence was the youngest in her family, but was always taking care of others. Her dream was to be a nurse. She believed it was her divine purpose. Her mother said she would never be able to be a nurse because at the time it was a man's job and was beneath her social standing. Florence's parents expected her to marry and be a good wife, not do something that was not seen as acceptable for a woman from her elite social circle. In 1844, Florence ignored her parents and enrolled as a nursing student at the Lutheran Hospital of Pasteur Flandre in Germany. Florence was a strong woman who always thought whatever man could do, she could do. In the early 1850s, while in London, Florence took a job at the Middlesex Hospital. She was so impressive at her job that within a year she was promoted to superintendent. At this time, the unsanitary conditions caused an outbreak of cholera. Florence's mission was to decrease the death rate at the hospital by improving the hygiene practices. In 1853, the Crimean War broke out between the British Empire and Russia in Siberia. In 1854, the Secretary of War, Sidney Herbert, asked for Florence and her nurses to come and tend to the fallen soldiers. William Russell, the Time correspondent, described the terrible neglect of the wounded and talked about the differences in care provided to the wounded between the British and the French. In the article, William asked, "Are there no devoted women among us, able and willing to go forth to minister the sick and suffering soldiers of the East in hospital of Sectaria? Are there none of the daughters of England at this extreme hour of need ready for such work of mercy? Must we fall so far below the French in the self-sacrifice and devotedness?" Florence Nightingale and 39 volunteer nurses traveled to Turkey to help the wounded soldiers. The New York Times described her deeds in this following statement: "She is a ministering angel without any exaggeration in these hospitals, and as her slender form glides quietly along each corridor, every poor fellow's face softens with gratitude at the sight of her. When all the medical officers have retired for the night, and the silence and darkness have settled down upon those miles of prostrate sick, she may be observed along with a little lamp in her hand, making her solitary rounds." When Florence visited a hospital in Constantinople, she was shocked by her discoveries. The soldiers were lying on tiny mattresses on the floor, all crammed together. The windows were shut tight. Rodents and bugs strayed over and around the wounded, and the staff was filthy with blood and body fluids. When she saw this, Florence knew she had to change something. Basic supplies such as bandages and soap were dwindling, and water was being rationed. More soldiers were dying from infection than from their war wounds. Florence got the soldiers who were least infirm to help scrub the inside of the hospital from floor to ceiling. She then separated the patients based on their wounds, ailments, and diseases. She also stressed the importance of proper hygiene among the nurses and staff, especially washing your hands between patients. She opened the windows to allow fresh air to circulate through the facility. The fact that the head of the hospital told Florence to keep her girls away from his crew was astonishing, especially since they needed all the help that they could get. Florence did all she could, even though she was told not to. Her actions reduced the death rate by 2/3. She also instituted an individual's kitchen, where appealing food was prepared for those patients with dietary needs. She also established a laundry so patients could have clean bed linens and a classroom and library at the hospital. Florence believed intellectual stimulation and entertainment would help with healing. After her trip, Florence wrote an 830-page report on her observations at Crimea called "Notes on Matters Affecting the Health, Efficiency, and Hospitals Administration of the British Army." This report not only analyzed her experience, but also proposed reformation of the military hospitals. Due to this report, the War Officers Administration Department was totally restricted, and the Royal Commission for Health in the Army was established in 1857. Florence made one of the first pie charts, and she called it the coxcomb. The coxcomb, she showed the deaths from the wounded in battle, deaths from other causes, and deaths from diseases. These charts help demonstrate the importance of sanitation. Upon her arrival home, Florence was hailed as a hero. The Queen rewarded Florence with an engraved brooch, which is known as the Nightingale Jewel, and worth $250,000. Florence used the money to establish St. Thomas Hospital and the Nightingale Training School for Nurses. Plays, poems, and songs were written in Florence's honor, and young women were aspiring to be like her. Because of Florence Nightingale, nursing was now seen as an honorable profession, and no longer frowned upon by the upper classes. While in Crimea, Florence contracted Crimean fever, from which she never fully recovered. At the age of 38 years old, Florence became bedridden and homebound, and would remain so until her death. Even though she was bedridden, her dedications to improving healthcare and averting patients' suffering never wavered. She met with politicians and distinguished visitors regarding her ideas on healthcare reform. In 1959, she published Notes on Hospitals, which focused on how to run civilian hospitals. She also consulted with the U.S. states during the Civil War on management to field hospitals and public sanitations in India. She was truly amazing to be able to do all of this from her bed. In 1908, she was given the Merit of Honor by King Edward. On August 13, 1910, Florence died unexpectedly at her home at the age of 90. Even though she was a hero, she was quietly buried in a family plot at Westminster Abbey. The Forence Nightingale Museum sits on the site of the original Nightingale Training School for Nurses, where her life and care are honored. She devoted her life to preventing diseases and ensuring safe and compassionate treatment for the poor and the suffering. Florence Nightingale was integral in helping people realize the importance of washing your hands between patients, and how important it was to separate patients based on their diseases. Her ideas have become standard in caring for patients around the globe. Florence Nightingale was a wonderful woman who did so many things. She was instrumental in making nursing a respected career for women. She changed nursing forever. She is known as the pioneer of modern nursing. May she rest in peace. Born May 12, 1820, died August 13, 1910. In 1912, the International Committee of the Red Cross instituted the Florence Nightingale Medal, which is the highest international distinction award to a nurse who has distinguished themselves through exceptional courage and devotion to the wounded, sick, disabled, or exemplary service or creative and pioneering spirit in the areas of the public health or nursing education. This medal is awarded on May 12th, Florence's birthday, and the International Nurses' Day. Florence's legacy lives on in nurses of today.